Welcome to the Fantasy Wildcard. I'm your host, Kev. You can follow me on Twitter at Dynasty_GOAT. With me tonight, as always, is my amazing co-host, Matt, who you can follow on Twitter at MattFFDynasty. Good evening, Matt. How are you?
Evening, Kev. Yeah, very well after that amazing comment. That's cheered me up now. But yeah, obviously Super Bowl week, so got to be excited, don't we? I mean, it's the big one. It's the one we've all been waiting for, even though sadly our teams didn't make it. But yeah, exciting times for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I thought I'd be a little bit nice this episode because, well, usually I don't say amazing at the start. I just say like it's Matt, it's Ali.
Yeah.
But actually, it's not Matt and Ali this week. It's just you, Matt. Which it's going to be an awesome show, me and you. It's been a while,
like old times.
Like old times. But yeah, Ali's not with us this week. We're going to come up with some sort of lie.
I just think he's not letting on, is he? Just how much that Tom Brady retirement. I think it's cutting deep. He had to have a week off and regather himself.
Indeed, I'm sure he'll be back very soon, maybe as early as next week. So if he's enjoying his time at the Pro Bowl, then yeah, we're looking to have him back very soon. But yeah, speaking of the Pro Bowl, that filled last week's gap because before that we had the NFL playoffs, and on today's show we'll be reviewing the standout performances from the 2021 NFL playoffs from a dynasty perspective. So it's going to be players that have stood out for the right and wrong reasons. And we'll let you decide that on this first guy if he stood out for the right or wrong reasons. So pass you over to your first chap who you'd like to speak about tonight, Matt.
Yeah, I've gone for Jimmy Garoppolo, Jimmy GQ. I think it's tough on like you just said. I don't know. Is it good? Is it bad? I think it's a bit like Marmite, isn't it, Jimmy Garoppolo, when it comes to the fantasy football community. But yeah, obviously,
I don't like Marmite.
I don't either, Kev. So that says it all, doesn't it? Yeah, coming off a successful season, but like I say, one that none of us really wanted him to have. Made it all the way to the championship weekend. And I mean, fair play to him keeping hold of the starting job. Obviously, we know Trey Lance come in for a game. Sadly, he got hurt after that game, so it allowed Jimmy G to come back in. And fair play to him keeping hold of the job all season. But I'd argue the 49ers, I think they made it as far as they did in spite of Jimmy Garoppolo, really. I'm not going to put it down to Jimmy Garoppolo carrying them to the playoffs and as far as they did. In the postseason, in those 3 games that he played against the Cowboys, the Packers and the Rams, 43 completions, 535 yards. That's 58% completion rate, 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So, as I say, nothing exciting. And then just looking at some of the stats on player profile, looking back to the regular season, 29th in deep ball attempts and deep ball completions, 31st in money throws. So again, nothing inspiring at all. And then you've just got to look at the supporting cast efficiency ranking. That was 4th. That just goes to show that the weapons that he has, Debo, Mitchell, Kittle, Ayuk, all these guys, they're the ones that carried this team as far as they did. All Jimmy Garoppolo had to do was just get the ball out of his hands, and those guys did the rest. So, yeah there's rumors going around that Garoppolo is expected to be traded this offseason. I've heard that the 49ers looking for a second-round pick for him. I mean, as much as I hate to admit it, yeah, he's not the sexiest, maybe to look at, but not in terms of his ability on the field. He's not elite. He's not one of these elite options, but he's a steady option. And to be honest, I think there's quite a few NFL teams out there that probably need that right now. A guy that can just steady the ship a little bit and maybe get a year or 2 out of him. And then in fantasy, it's pretty much the same. It is a low-end QB2, not much upside, but he is pretty safe, I guess. And he doesn't usually let you down many weeks. He just, as I say, just not very inspiring. But yeah, hopefully he's got a couple of years left in him. So my question to you, Kev, is if Garoppolo does decide to leave San Francisco, which of his pass catching weapons do you think dynasty value is going to be affected the most by him leaving?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm glad you didn't ask me to find the Jimmy G spot where he's going to land next year. I'd have trouble finding where he's going to land at the G spot as such. So
we'll struggle to find it again.
we do. Just a small rant to begin with on Jimmy G. I mean, QB wins. It's not a stat. I think he is a bit of a fraud, to be honest. You touched upon it with how good the weapons were to make him look better than he actually is. He's like Monty Burns in The War on the Simpsons, where he's taking injury and getting carried by his teammates. So, second round pick, I'm sure that a team will be willing to pay that. He's a He's a guy that's gone to a Super Bowl. He's gone deep into the playoffs in another. I see him as a bridge QB veteran, which is fine. A QB3 in Dynasty. That's my rant over on Jimmy G. Obviously, him leaving potentially means Trey Lance arriving. So I think I'm going to first of all take the question another way and say that I think that all the weapons values will go down actually when Jimmy G leaves, which is pretty shocking because obviously Trey Lance is going to create hysteria. When I say the value is going down, I mean in my eyes. I think in the public's eyes, the value is going to go up. Like I said, Trey Lance, hysteria around him. He's maintained his value more than any other QB that was a rookie this season. But short term, I just can't see better results for these receivers and tight end with Lance than Jimmy G. I think it'll be a run-heavy approach. I know it's been quite heavy already, but I can't see him suddenly becoming a pass-heavy team or increasing the passing opportunity. I think there's going to be growing pains. And as well, Trey Lance is a Konami QB. He's going to be scoring more rushing touchdowns. It's going to take away from the receiving touchdowns. But swinging it back to the original question and answering it properly, I'm going to say George Kittle, just based on him being tight end 3 overall. I think he's too good a block to suddenly become a 150 target tight end with the raw but highly touted and high potential of Trey Lance, in my opinion. I think the most stable is Debo. But I do worry about the role as wide back and his durability in that role if they're going to give him 150 touches a season out of the backfield. Basically, 49ers players, they might not be as productive for fantasy, but hey, they might actually win a Super Bowl without Jimmy G at QB. So I just want to know if you think there's a different player that stands out to lose more with Lance at QB.
I think, to be honest, Kev, I think you pretty much nailed it. Like you said, he's going to be a rookie quarterback coming in. He's going to need all the protection he can get. I think we know he's obviously got that rushing ability. We know he can extend drives with his legs and everything. But I do think they're going to ask Kittle to do some blocking for him, try and just help out a little bit more. Deebo Samuel, I think he's obviously he's still going to be fine in his role, given that he is such a dynamic player. The fact that they can get the ball into his hand quick, doesn't need to be running downfield, does it, to get fantasy points? He can, as I say, do it out of the backfield, do it in the short routes as well. So, yeah, Debo should be fine. Mitchell, again, you would argue that maybe the rushing that Lance has got, it could take away from Mitchell. But then again, we've seen it with guys like in Baltimore with Jackson and then the running back over there. It kind of helps because the defense doesn't know which player they need to focus on. Is it the quarterback or the running back? So, yeah, I think Kittle is probably the one that stands out to me. Brandon Ayuk's another one. I think he's a guy that can produce with the short routes, get the ball to him, and another guy that's a bit of a playmaker. So, yeah, Kittle, I think you're spot on that one, Kev. Kittle's the one that stands out to me that could struggle. And given the fact that he is ranked so high as a tight end as well in fantasy.
Yeah, and I just want to caveat as well, obviously, our man who's not here tonight, Ali, he's a big Trey Lance fan. We've got a few Trey Lance truthers that listen to the show as well. So just want to be very clear that I think Trey Lance is great. It's an awesome situation for him with all these guys that have got run after catch ability and that are going to really help him inflate his pass numbers, even if he's not throwing it deep down the field all the time. I think it'll be more of a shot play team where it's the big scoring plays and stuff close to the line of scrimmage like that happens now. Yeah,
I think that's the exciting thing with Lance is obviously if it takes time, we know that he can run the ball and everything, but we do also know that he's got a cannon as well. He can. It's not like he can't throw it deep. It's not like we're talking. It's going to sound a bit harsh, but like Lamar Jackson, obviously we know the struggles. I know his good friend Tom. He'll not be happy that I mentioned Lamar Jackson, but we know that he's not the greatest thrower, but he's definitely shown signs of improvement and everything. But we just know that Lance, he's got that unlocked potential. We know he can throw it deep. He just needs to refine that a little bit. So, yeah, I think it's really exciting for Trey Lance. He's going to be a guy that all that hype that's going to be getting built up around him. I'm going to be part of that hype. I mean, I'm really excited for it, and I can't wait to see what he can do. And hopefully, in a couple of years, we could be talking top 3 quarterback in terms of fantasy.
Indeed, we might be. I think we will be. But yeah, going from one exciting young QB in Trey Lance, even though that was about Jimmy G, we've quickly pushed over Jimmy G, didn't we?
That's what we've been wanting to do all season, haven't we? So Why change now?
Brush him under the carpet. We're going to stick with exciting young QBs, young, loosely used as a term for this guy. But yeah, it's Joe Burrow. I'm going to talk about Joe Burrow, the QB of the Bengals, who are in the Super Bowl, future Super Bowl winning MVP Joe Burrow. Maybe not this year, but he's been pretty good this offseason. I mean, the cool kids call him Ice King Joe Burrow. I'm not that cool, but I think he's done amazing.
You just made it uncool, Kevin.
I know. Sorry, lads. I've also seen him called the Prince of Ohio and Joe Cool and all sorts of names. So Joey Franchise. But yeah, coming off a horrific torn ACL last season, and then he's in his first full season as a starter in the NFL, he's took the Bengals to the Super Bowl. He's come from behind, win on the road at the Chiefs in Arrowhead. He overturned the 21-10 halftime deficit. And the Chiefs are no mugs. They're an experienced team. They've been to the AFC Championship game the last 4 years under Patrick Mahomes. I mean, we've definitely seen a rise in his dynasty value with the playoff run. But if we look at his actual output in the playoffs, his fantasy points-wise, 17.56, 12.42, 20.5. It's an average that puts him on the QB 14 pace. Now, granted, that is against playoff-level defense, but if we look a little bit deeper to those figures, Las Vegas, they're middle of the road for how easy they are against the pass, against QBs. Tennessee is top 10 easy, and then KC top 3. So I think real life is doing awesome winning these big games, but fantasy, I'm still a little bit hesitant compared to the public. I think we know that Burrow, he had that big fantasy finish. He was QB1 in the combined championship weeks, 16 and 17, but yeah, this value increase has been rather interesting. He's jumped up to QB4 on keep trade cut. He's gone above guys, proven elite guys, actually, Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson. And this is on the back of a QB10 finish overall last season, 19.4 fantasy points per game. To give you some context, if we go back just a little bit, Justin Herbert, he had 21.7 fantasy points in 2020, and his ADP only rose to QB7. So I guess the counter argument is that if the dual threat returns for Burrow, that's going to really lift his value as well. He scored 19.8% of his fantasy points from rushing in 2020, and then this season it dropped to 7.65%. So I do get that. I also get the argument that QB4 is based on his situation, the weapons, 2 top 10 dynasty wide receivers, a top 10 dynasty running back. No other QB in the league has that high-end weapons at his disposal. So just want to get your thoughts, Matt, on Joe Burrow, if you think he is a top 5 dynasty QB in your eyes, and if not, what percentage chance is it that you think he'll jump into your top 5 before the 2022 season?
Yeah, so right now he's right on the edge for me. I've got him as QB6. But it's not a case of me not liking Joe Burrow. It's more that there's 5 guys that I like more than Joe Burrow, really. He's probably in that big tier 2 that I've got alongside guys like Justin Herbert, Murray, Lamar Jackson. All those guys, I think, are in one tier for me right now. So, yeah, on that side of it, it's not going to take much for him to break into that top 5 because, as I say, he's tied with guys that I've got in the top 5. However, I do think we are going to see a spike in value from guys that are below him, such as the rookies from last year, Trey Lance, who we just spoke about, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence as well. And then maybe there's obviously guys like Deshaun Watson, if he plays next year. That's another guy that could take a jump up, because we know that when Watson's playing, he's top 5 quite easily for me, and depending where he lands and in the situation, as I say, and if he can play, he's another guy that can break up there. So it is tough to say just how confident I am that he can make that jump into top 5. Putting a percent on it, can I just go 50? Seeing as I'm so indecisive, I think 50% chance is a chance he could, and a chance that he couldn't jump up into the top 5.
I'm sure our audience will love the clarity we've given on.
All right, I'm gonna change it. I'm gonna say he's more likely not to 49. Be in the top 5. Yeah, so that's 49%. No, I just think there's, as I say, the guys below him, guys that I'm really excited about. Trey Lance, obviously we've just spoken about him. The guy I'm really excited about. Deshaun Watson, if he does play again, another quarterback that I think is top quality. It could easily be QB1 if all this situation didn't happen and everything. So yeah, my final answer, Kev, is that he won't make it into the top 5. But the situation is great as well that he's in, as you mentioned, that the weapons that he has, it should lead to him being a rock solid QB1 in fantasy.
Yeah, I was just pulling your leg on that one, Matt. Obviously, top 5 is right on his cusp. I just wanted to say that Joe Burrow is a huge dynasty sell, but jokes aside, I think he's done awesome. He's definitely risen in value. I'm not quite there where the public are, but he's definitely someone that's.
Whereabouts do you have him, Kev? Just out of interest, are you like me, just outside, or?
Yeah,
I know you're not his biggest fan, so.
Yeah, I've got him QB6.
Yeah,
but I've got him in a tier below. So I've got the top 3, and then I've got another tier with Lamar and Kyler, and then Burrow's part of my tier 3. I just can't put him up with those guys that have proven it with the legs. Really, if he does take that jump with his legs and gets back to the 17% I mentioned of his fantasy points coming from rushing, I'm happy to bump him back up. Actually, let's get on the on the Joe Burrow train. And speaking about trains, this next guy, it's oh my god, there's plenty of bandwagon fans that have really got on this hype train last season and again towards the end of this season. So who's the next guy that stood out for you in the playoffs, Matt?
Yeah, so I've gone for Cam Akers. I mean, really impressive the fact that he's even been able to play this year, given the fact that he tore his Achilles in the off season. I was really high on him heading into this year. Looked good in those final few games as a rookie. The offense as a whole looked really exciting. The fact that Matthew Stafford was coming in and taking over for Jared Goff, that was a bump for me for Cam Akers. And then absolutely gutted when he went down with the Achilles injury. And I was really concerned about the future outlook. We know that the common feeling when it comes to these Achilles injuries, we write as a death sentence for these running backs. But I mean, he's completely blown that out of the water. The fact he's come back the same year and returned to football, it's a real feel good story. The fact that he's been able to do it, getting back into the playoffs, being a part of this team that's got all the way to the Super Bowl. It is a really feel good story, and he's looked good in spurts, I think, during the playoffs. Overall, though, he has struggled to get things going. He's had 54 carries, 151 yards. That's just 2.8 yards per carry. And then he's had 5 receptions for 62 yards. It's been really impressive, the fact that he's been able to handle a pretty strong workload, 18 carries per game he's been having in the playoffs. Again, the fact that he's come back from this injury and he's able to do that is encouraging to see. It's just that the efficiency, it's just not been there in the playoffs. And then just looking at his fantasy value right now, given his return, it jumped as high as RB6 on Keep Trade Cut. It has settled down a little bit now, gone down to RB10. But long term is where it becomes interesting, just thinking about this backfield, how it's going to play out. We know they've obviously got Henderson, who again looked good in spurts when he was healthy this past season. Sony Michel as well has been really solid. Looks really good when filling in as the lead back. So maybe does this backfield become a running back by committee in 2022? The one thing to think about is that McVay usually rides that hot hand. There does tend to usually be a clear lead running back, a guy that tends to have the majority of the carries. So if I'm going to back anybody, if we are going to assume that he does do the same and gives it to a guy, I'm going to stick with Cam Akers. I mean, I can't leave the guy. The fact that he's come back and shown that he's still pretty much the player that he was before the injuries, it's exciting. But I do know that there's obviously risk attached to that, and I don't think that's been taken into consideration, to be honest, looking at the current rankings. So my question to you is, Kev, I know that you disagree pretty much with the current value, especially when it was high as RB6. But where do you have him now in your RB rankings?
Yeah, I just thought it was really interesting that he was running back 6 before the injury, and then he went back up to after the injury. It's not making the risk of the unknown, the re-injury, how he's going to look. It's a small sample that he's come back. I think it's a great feel-good story. But it wasn't logical for me to bump up to running back 6. But I think I might be being a little bit harsh here, but what has he actually done? He had 3 nice games as a rookie versus 3 really bad defenses against running backs. I do think it's good, the fact that he's in the Rams system. We've seen Henderson shine. We've seen Sony Michel shine as well towards the end of this season. But with Akers, I doubt he's a bell cow again, where he's going to be consistently getting 20 rushes a game. I think it would be wise for McVay not to do that. but like looking at Akers from Dynasty point of view, he's my running back 12, which isn't too far off running back 10, I think is where he's at now. I've got him in a tier with Akers, Etienne, and Dobbins. Obviously, the link is there, all coming back from injury. Yep. I'm playing on 2-year window, so I'm happily going to take guys like Dalvin, Kamara, and Saquon over him. So, would you have any of those 3 veterans over Akers in your rankings?
I mean, it's tough, Kev. I am a Cam Akers fan, so it's hard. But I don't think Dalvin Cook had. Yeah, this is going to be a long-winded answer to say no, basically. But Dalvin Cook, I don't have above. Alvin Kamara, he's probably one that I have pretty close. Obviously, the news coming out in the past couple of days that he got arrested and everything. That's going to be interesting to see how that develops. But guys like Kamara and Saquon, these are 2 guys that have looked. Kev, no, the answer is no. I've got Cam Akers above these guys. It's hard to say, obviously, as a Giants fan. I love Saquon Barkley, but what we've seen from Saquon these past couple of years, it's been tough in terms of fantasy, and if you have him in fantasy, you're probably quite annoyed with how it's turned out. So yeah, I've still got Cam Akers above, but I am fully aware that there is a bit of risk attached into the fact that I've got him over those guys.
Indeed, and you mentioned about being annoyed with running backs, and that leads us nicely onto my selection, a guy that stood out for the wrong reasons in the playoffs, or didn't stand out at all, really. My good mate, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. 2 years now, he's failed expectations. Running back 22 fantasy points per game as rookie. Running back 29 fantasy points per game this season, then topped off by the usage in the playoffs. I know he was coming off an injury in week 16, but it was clearly playing behind journeyman Jerick McKinnon, 8 touches against the Bills and 7 against the Bengals. But if we look deeper, he's been outplayed by all sorts of vets: McKinnon, Darrell Williams, Derek Gore. It's been really frustrating time to be a CH owner, especially when you took him over guys like Swift, Akers, and Dobbins if he was your running back 1 or 2. I bottled it on CAH when he went to KC. I moved him up. Before the draft, I actually said that he'd never be a top 15 Dynasty running back. But yeah, landing spot, maybe move him up. If I had more conviction then, I'd look like a legend now for that call. But needless to say, it's the lowest value he's ever been. He's currently running back 25 at Keep Trade Cut, and he's been slowly drifting for basically the past 2 years. There's been a lot of excuses, a lot of underperformance, but he's potentially coming to the point where he's an easy sell low type in Dynasty. So who's the lowest ranked running back that you trade away CEH straight up for right now?
I think somebody like AJ Dillon, that kind of range of running backs. I haven't fully completed my rankings just yet, but CEH is pretty much around that mid-low RB2 range, and that's obviously where I've got Dillon as well. To be honest, I'm not fully out on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I just wish that, I mean, we see the way that they use Williams and McKinnon. Why do they not use Clyde Edwards-Helaire in that way? I just don't get it at all. When he was at LSU, he was used in the passing game, looked really good. I thought that was the whole reason why Mahomes wanted to get a guy like that. And then it just turns out that he's just not really being used in the passing game like we thought he would. And then just thinking about the injuries, that is a bit of a big concern as well. Obviously, it's what you get. I mean, these smaller running backs, pays me to say it because it obviously links exactly. I was waiting for that. But yeah, you do have those concerns, don't you, with these smaller guys? The fact that you've got these like 6'7", 6'8" defensive players jumping on top of him. You do wonder how they manage to avoid the injuries. So that is a bit of a concern with him. Missed time both of the previous 2 years, and as well both of those times have been around the fantasy playoffs. So that's really got a sting if you have him in Dynasty. Yeah, I agree with what you said, Kevin. I'm probably looking to get off him while there's still people that have a bit of hope in the fact that he can make that bounce back. Yeah, one more failed year, and I think that's it. I think you've missed your chance to jump off him.
Yeah, it's really fun and interesting trying to think of ways of how I can package Edwards-Helaire in a trade off my team without making it look too obvious. I'm just trying to flog him, but yeah, he's a guy that's got rock bottom Dynasty value. The next guy we're going to discuss is the opposite, really, isn't it? It's a guy that's had the highest value of his career. So with that tease, who's the next guy for you, Matt?
Yeah, it's Gabriel Davis, the wide receiver from the Buffalo Bills, and like you said, a really quiet season from him, to be honest, in 2021. Many hoped that he would have that breakout, but he was stuck behind guys like obviously Stephon Diggs, then Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders, stuck behind these guys on the depth chart for most of the year. Had a little run of good games, week 13 to week 15, where he scored 4 touchdowns in those 3 games, but beyond that, in the regular season, didn't really see much from him. But then the playoffs come around and he turns into a completely different player. Against New England, he had just 2 receptions, but 41 yards and a touchdown. And then the game that we're all going to talk about all off season against the Kansas City Chiefs, 8 receptions, 201 yards and 4 touchdowns. I mean, it's crazy to think that he did that, and as I say, given the fact that we barely saw him during the regular season, just to come in playoffs and do that is crazy. But in turn, that's now seen his value take a jump on keep trade cut. He's jumped up from the wide receiver 44 before that game, and then right after that game jumped up to wide receiver 34. So 10 spots in the space of 3 hours or whatever the game was.
Class.
So yeah, crazy. Just looking back, he was a 4th round pick in the 2020 NFL draft, but I think the future outlook, it does become interesting. Both Cole Beasley, who I mentioned, and Emmanuel Sanders, these are both guys that are 32 and over, both coming up to the end of the contracts as well. I believe that Sanders is a free agent this offseason. Beasley, I think, has got 1 more year before he's a free agent. So it does then enter an interesting part. Does he then take a step forward? Is he going to be used more going into 2022? Can he see himself moving up that depth chart? And if he does, I think he can be a really solid weapon for Josh Allen moving forward. We know he's a good red zone target given his size, and he did show that, as we mentioned, he wasn't used much last season in the regular season, but he did have 17 red zone targets, which was 14th amongst wide receivers in the NFL. So even in that reduced role, the fact that he was still being brought on when the team was in the red zone is encouraging to see. I mean, the hype is going to continue to build throughout the off season. Like I said, it's going to live long in the memory, that game against the Chiefs, and I think his value is going to continue to creep up in the off season. So, Kev, will you be looking to buy him? Will you be looking to sell him, or will you be looking to hold Davis in this off season?
Really interesting question, Matt. Thanks. To be honest, I could have picked any of them options and gone with it, but I mean, first of all, I've got to be honest, I've not fully done the wide receiver ranks. Wide receiver 34 keep trade cut, I think on the surface that does feel too high. He's been the wide receiver 57 the last 2 seasons, and he actually dropped points from 2020 to 2021. 35 catches in both years as well, which is quite funny. But a wide receiver 3 in Dynasty, it's pretty crazy. I think it's interesting that he was used as a deep threat and a red zone threat. Wide receiver 22 in fantasy points per game. So some people just probably think that if he gets more targets at wide receiver 22 per target, he's going to do great. But actually, because of the targets he's getting, he's not going to add more of those targets. It's going to be the short and intermediate targets he adds. So I think as well, Sanders and Beasley, they will be moved on in time. I think Dawson Knox is this year's Robert Tonyan, touchdown heavy, low receptions. So you can spin a picture of his competition as to why you might be in on Davis, but I can see the dart buying the hope of an increased role. But honestly, if he's not taking the leap or stealing targets from pensioners Beasley and Sanders, it does feel like a bit of a trap. And I'm actually getting Mecole Hardman vibes, where he's getting a lot of love for the splash plays. The offense is in, the QB is tighter. So I'm going to be avoiding at wide receiver 34. If it was in the 50s or if it was Dynasty best ball, then sure. But overall, it's a huge sell for me. Maybe hold 1 share just in case he's a big outlier. So I'm guessing you're slightly higher than me on Gabe Davis. The question is, Matt, what are we going to do with him in our co-own team in the Wildcard League?
Well, Kev, what I think we should do is we cut out that whole part that you've just said and that I've said, that we're not that high on him, and then we just say, oh yeah, we love Davis. We think he's going to break out in 2022, and hopefully we can sell him and get a 2nd round pick. I think if any of his listeners and that are in that league want to give us a 2nd round pick for him, I mean, yeah, drop us a message and we can arrange that. No, I mean, it is tough. Like I said, I think it's interesting going into next season, but there's a lot of variables to it. The fact Beasley sticking around. We know that he sees plenty of targets. Stephon Diggs is obviously great. If Dawson Knox does carry on what he's been doing, maybe sees a few more targets, then I mean, what's Davis looking at? And we know Josh Allen, he runs the ball plenty as well. So it's a tough one with Davis and a guy that I'm not super high on personally either. And I think I'm looking to sell him if I do have him anywhere and try and take advantage of that bit of hype that's currently around him.
Yeah, if you're in that league, come and get him, but make sure you're fair because we're decent people. Well, Matt is. I am sometimes.
So when you want to be, when you need to be.
When I need to be. Yeah, we're nice at the start of this show, aren't I? So, the next guy we're gonna talk about. Obviously, Ali's not here tonight, so I had to really step up and put the Ali cape on and talk about a Bucks player. And I mean, the only Bucks player that really stood out that's still in the NFL is Mike Evans, the wide receiver. What an awesome playoffs he had. A lot was resting on his shoulders about Godwin and Antonio Brown, but he delivered in these playoffs. 26.7 fantasy points against the Eagles and then 25.9 fantasy points against the Rams. So extremely small sample size, but this was the wide receiver one overall pace for the year. 2 games, lol. But another top 15 wide receiver season. He's 6th overall in his career, and he's never finished outside the top 25 in his 8 years as a pro. He also hit 1,000 yards a game, which he's done every season. There's a clown on Twitter, I'm not going to name him, but he was moaning about Evans did it in a 17-game season, not understanding the fact that he actually missed a game and he did it on 16 games. So truly, Evans had a Hall of Fame type career. I think in Dynasty, people have already begun to and will continue to fade a 28-year-old wide receiver that's just lost Tom Brady. Wide receiver 20 at Keep Trade Cup, but this is going to go down further. He'll be 29 next year. You've got no clue who the QB is going to be. Talent is undeniable, but guys like Kyle Trask, Blaine Gabbert, is pretty funny. Sorry, Ali. But yeah, sure there's better cheap QB options out there. I think you're going to see his targets go up and the efficiency go down. But I am still interested in Dynasty. I know that Ali will still be on him, and I know that Ali likes this type of question I'm going to ask you as well. So, hypothetical question, Matt. Without Tom Brady, who are you taking in a startup? Mike Evans or DeAndre Hopkins?
So you took it on the heartstrings there, Kev. I'm also pouring a bit of salt in the wound by going for the guy that was my bust in 2021, but obviously a guy that I really like in Nuke Hopkins. And I promise you now, Kev, this is not Tate Lock, but I'm still sticking with Nuke Hopkins. Despite obviously the disappointing 2021 season, both pretty similar in terms of their age, so you can't really split them on that side of it. But I just think with Hopkins, at least we have a clearer picture of the situation that he's in. We know the quarterback, Kyler Murray, a guy that I'm still high on. I know Kyler Murray also had his struggles last year, but when it comes to Evans, we don't really know now who his quarterback's going to be. We can all sit here and hope that he gets a solid quarterback. But I mean, if they do go with somebody like Trask, or I mean, it's tough. It's tough to have any kind of conviction in saying. But again, I'm not going to take anything away from Mike Evans. He's a guy that I do like, and a guy that I've spoke quite highly of in last off season, and somebody that I do think is constantly undervalued given the fact that he does just produce year after year. But then also just looking at Tampa Bay, we don't know the situation with Chris Godwin as well, whether he'll be leaving or staying in Tampa. That could play a big part in the production that Evans has in 2022. Personally, I don't think there is much between both of them. I'd say they're pretty much neck and neck, but like you just touched upon, if you're looking at Keep Trade Cut, Evans as wide receiver 20 and then DeAndre Hopkins wide receiver 31. I think that's a little bit too far apart for me personally. I think they are pretty much neck and neck, and I do just favour Hopkins because we know the situation a little bit more.
Yeah, I think if there's a show to fade any Bucks players, it's this one when Ali's not here. I think Ali's still pretty bullish on Evans, actually. I think just from memory, I think he had him at wide receiver 16 in his rankings that he did a couple of weeks ago. So if I'm incorrect on that and it's a little bit lower, Ali, I do apologise. I've made you sound like a homer there.
It's probably higher. Knowing Ali, I'm surprised it's not wide receiver 1, to be honest.
Oh dear. And speaking of wide receiver ones, this next guy, a little bit like Hopkins and Evans, he has He has been a wide receiver one in the past. He's an older chap now, but yeah, an interesting guy actually. Matt, who have you got?
Yeah, definitely interesting coming from me, being a Giants fan. But Odell Beckham Jr., I mean, it's a love-hate one with me and Odell Beckham, to be honest, and this bounce back to form. I mean, I'm always going to love it when he shows up. He's one of my favorite wide receivers in the NFL, just going back to his early New York Giants time and the career that he had earlier on. But then I hate the fact that he's doing it right now, not on the Giants. I mean, I wish that we still had him in this kind of form and not the form that we sadly had towards the end of his time in New York. But yeah, we know obviously he had the tough couple of years or 3 years, whatever it was in Cleveland. But now he just looks a completely different player with the Rams. Looks great as their wide receiver too. I think it's interesting though, just thinking about Odell Beckham. The timings with obviously Robert Woods going down with that ACL injury, I think it's you could argue that it's kind of gone in his favor, the fact that Woods went down. It's allowed him to step straight into that wide receiver 2 position. I mean, will we be talking about Odell Beckham in the same light if Robert Woods was still there? I personally say I don't think we would. I think we know what Robert Woods is, and we know that Stafford liked targeting Robert Woods as well. So yes, it's interesting just thinking about that and what could have been if that didn't happen. But it did happen, and he's looked great. As I said, he scored 5 touchdowns in the 8 regular season games that he played for the Rams. And then in the postseason, again, still looking great. 19 receptions, 236 yards and a touchdown in the 3 games that he's had. And another key part of this team and the fact that they've made it to the Super Bowl. Again, as a fan of Odell Beckham, I really do hope that the Rams win for Odell. I think the talent that he has, I think a guy with that level of talent, he deserves it. I truly believe that he deserves to get a ring. And yeah, it pains me that it's not with the Giants, like I said, but I do hope that he gets it. And then looking beyond this season, that's when it starts to become interesting. He's actually a free agent after this year. It's going to be interesting to see if the Rams are able to keep him. Has he now played his way into a much larger contract, the way that he's rounded out this season with the Rams? And we know that the Rams, they are actually up against it when it comes to the cap space in 2022. So maybe now do they struggle to be able to keep hold of him because of how he's played and performed, and as I say, has he earned himself that bigger contract? So Kev, if the Rams are unable to keep hold of Odell Beckham for 2022, where would your ideal landing spot be for him to try and maintain this level of form that he's got?
Yeah, I love this question, Matt. It's very interesting. It's great to speculate about where players could or should go. I agree with you. I can't see the Rams keeping both Beckham and Bobby Trees. I did have a long think about this one, and then it hit me the perfect spot. It's the Vikings. They're linking up with his current Rams OC, new Vikings head coach, Kevin O'Connell. I mean, he started to flash with the Rams working with him. Secondly, I think the Rams scheme will roll over to the Vikings where they become more pass-heavy formations as well. I think KG Osborne was a nice find, but if they're rolling plenty of 3 and 4 wide receiver sets, we need more than KG Osborne and Amir Smith-Marset. Plus, Adam Thielen will be 32 next year. He's still performing at a high level, but he's getting on a little bit now. I do think as well, Beckham's the ideal wide receiver 2, 3 on a pass-heavy team. I think in the Vikings, you've got Jefferson as the alpha, but I can see him and Odell Beckham switching roles between the slot for easy matchups. Let's not forget, OBJ is very adept outside. It means Jefferson could move back to the slot occasionally, where he was an absolute star at LSU. That's where he did most of his damage. And I just think with the Vikings, they've got vets like Thielen, Cook. OBJ is the ideal guy to try and go for a ship over the next couple of years. It'd be pointless keeping those older guys to go into a rebuild. So obviously you've got that nostalgia for Beckham from his Giants days. What if he ended up playing for the other team at MetLife, the Jets? Would you be happy for Dynasty then?
I mean, it's not a bad spot, is it? To be honest, it immediately step in and be the wide receiver 1 on that offense. But you do have to think, obviously, the Jets they didn't look brilliant, did they, last season? I still think Wilson can improve on what he's shown. Zach Wilson, I think he can take a step forward, but he is still, as I say, a young quarterback. I don't think he's going to be able to live up to the kind of form that we're seeing right now with the Rams. I think he does need to go to a team that's more steady. That the Vikings that you just touched upon, I think that is an absolute ideal spot. We're seeing a lot of mock drafts for the upcoming draft, the NFL draft, and you see the Vikings targeting wide receivers in these mock drafts. So they clearly have a need for it, and like touched upon, they don't really have a wide receiver 3. Osborne looks good, but I mean, yeah, if you can get a guy like OBJ, then yeah, I think they've got to go for it. And then, as you touched upon, a team that can push for a Super Bowl with the players that they have. So yeah, I'd enjoy the Vikings as a spot. Maybe not the Jets though. Let's just keep the Giants as the only New York team that Odell plays for.
Indeed, and we've got Beckham, who was a star in the NFC East for your Giants early on in his career, and we're going to move on to a guy now that's potentially a star in the NFC East, and the star's also on his helmet. It's CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, I'm gonna call him an alpha then, but that's probably not the right thing to do. He had a promising rookie season where he's either 22 with Dak, and then this past season a little bit underwhelming, wide receiver 19 with Dak. So it continued into the playoffs. It was a disappointing game against the 49ers. 1 catch, 1 carry, 3.6 fantasy points, and a real disappointing end to his second season. It's quite funny to see that Sir John Kuechly cut after the game, where he went from wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 10 in a matter of days, but he's crept back up to wide receiver 7 now. He's steadied out. Looking deeper though, his overall value has been dropping since November time. I think anything from wide receiver 3 overall to wide receiver 12 is pretty fluid. I think it's one of the most unpredictable parts of rankings. I know me personally, I think CeeDee Lamb and T. Higgins are pretty close. They're tied at the hip in my eyes, but I often see Lamb way above Higgins. Currently, there's a gap of 3 spots, but it has been bigger in the past. And I think both very solid second-year guys tied to solid QBs. I think the reason that CD gets a bump above Higgins is that path to being the alpha, the wide receiver 1 on his team. Obviously, it's not going to happen for poor T. I'm sure he'll be fine without that. But yeah, I think Lamb was pretty solid on the metrics side. I just like to see him used more outside and more consistently deeper down the field, which is how the Bengals ironically used T. Higgins. But I've now got Lamb as my wide receiver 7, which is bang on where the public have him. So well done me. I guess the big question is, what spot do you rank CeeDee Lamb? And coming back to an old take from yourself, who have you got in Dynasty, Lamb or T. Higgins?
Yeah, so I've currently got him as a wide receiver 10. So yeah, not so good for me, Kev, on nailing the position. But yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the old take that I had. I got some real stick for having T. Higgins above CeeDee Lamb last off season. Admittedly, it was more down to the fact that Dak Prescott, it was still uncertain if he was going to sign that contract. And when it comes to me and doing my rankings, if there's that kind of uncertainty, I find it hard to put my name, put my conviction to a guy like that when we don't know the outcome in a matter of, well, it was like months, weren't it, back then, what the situation could have been like. So I did have Higgins above him. I do think from a talent standpoint, there's nothing in it for me between these two guys. But I do think that people were reluctant to admit that the talent was that close, and obviously everybody wanted to jump on CeeDee Lamb. Right now, I've literally still got it a couple of spots between the guys. I do have Higgins just below CeeDee Lamb right now. But again, touching on tiers, they are in the same tier for me. So nothing in it at all. You touched upon it, Kev. The talks of will Amari Cooper leave? Will Michael Gallup leave? That's going to be really interesting in terms of Lamb's value. But then when you just look at the raw stats, the receptions, the yardage, pretty much neck and neck, aren't they, in terms of production? Yeah. So, can I just have them both in Dynasty? I mean, two great young wide receivers. It's funny. I know from watching playoffs games and T. Higgins, when he just makes catches, you just think, wow, what an unbelievable player he is. He just seems to go up and get it. It just comes down with everything. And they're both, as I say, they're both really exciting. Both guys that I love to have. Sadly, I don't think I have any CeeDee Lamb, to be honest, but I do have plenty of T. Higgins, so that's always good. I
think I'm the same, actually. No CeeDee Lamb.
It's just the hype, isn't it? The hype that he had last off season, it was always going to be tough.
And you've got to think that earlier on this season, T. Higgins, he didn't start the season the fastest, and people were burying T. Higgins. So it can all change very quickly. But speaking of burying, we've got burial reference coming up very shortly. Who's your final guy that stood out for you in the playoffs, Matt?
Yeah, that was a nice little segue to what I'm
Thank
about
you.
to say. But just like the Undertaker at WrestleMania, the streak is over. Travis Kelce, the reigning tight end, one year after year after year. It comes to the end at the hands of Mark Brock Lesnar and lose. Sadly, ending the streak, albeit he finished tight end too. So, I mean, is it that much of a big deal? But
the streak is
like,
over.
the streak is over. But yeah, dominant again in the postseason. Kelce, 23 receptions, 299 yards, and 3 touchdowns in 3 games, averaging pretty much 100 yards a game and a touchdown a game. I mean, this is from a guy that's a tight end. He's putting up wide receiver one performances. It's crazy. It's amazing when it comes to fantasy. To be honest, I'm shocked that his dynasty value it's starting to fall. Tight end 4 currently on keep trade cut. I do get the fact he's obviously 32 years old, but still, I mean, put some respect on his name, please. I mean, he's just an absolute dominant tight end. Averages 19 fantasy points per game this past season. I mean, any tight end that does that, that's a cheat code in fantasy. That's a wide receiver in your tight ends, but you're not playing with tight ends, are you? Playing with an extra wide receiver, not a tight end. So, yeah, can we just put a little bit of respect, please, on Travis Kelce's name? And yeah, hopefully it can long may it continue. So, Kev, have we now reached that stage of Kelce's career where it's, if you have him in Dynasty, you've just got to ride this thing out, and you've got him now until the end of his career?
Yeah, like the Undertaker till the end, I guess. But I think that's it. It's exactly right what you've said. You stick with him. He's already sliding down tight end rankings, but you've got to think if he's on a contender, which really, if you've got Kelce, you should be a contender. If you're not a contender, you've got Kelce, shame on you. But yeah, I think you're not going to get a better guy on a weekly basis in your lineup. You can try and hit a shooting star, someone that's rising in the ranks, but it's not a tactic I'm a huge fan of, to be honest. I tend to try and find an alternative on my roster or a placeholder to try and trade up from it as my tight end 2, rather than ship off Kelce and lose points in my lineup. But basically what I'm trying to say is I try and get another guy on my roster as a long-term replacement or as a step to the next guy after Kelce. You got to treat him like Derrick Henry of tight ends, in my opinion. Personally, I still think he's great. He is a little bit more volatile now than previous, but I think as well, I do expect the Chiefs to add another big offensive weapon this offseason, so that might keep him volatile. But yeah, I just think he's rock solid. The only one guy I definitely have above him is Kyle Pitts. A little bit like, because he is going to be used like a wide receiver, I feel like. I'm really, really high on Pitts, and I need to get some Pitts shares, so I've got to put him number 1 because I don't have any of him. But yeah, I think Travis Kelce, he shouldn't be tight end 4. Is he still your tight end 1 out of interest? You're talking very bullish on him.
It's tough, isn't it? This just feels like Newt Hopkins all over again for me. I'm gonna say I like him, and then he's gonna fade out, and I'm gonna look like an absolute muppet next off season. But I think he's right up there. I think Kyle Pitts, the cop-out way would be to put Kyle Pitts as number 1 because he's young. We know for a fact that his value eventually at some point is going to be higher than Travis Kelce, and then I can say, ha, told you so. It was always going to happen. I mean, it's a way of life. It's going to happen. He's going to have more value than Kelce at some point. So, yeah, I think Kyle Pitts is probably my tight end 1. I think it was only a couple of weeks ago that I said he wasn't, but. Yeah,
I'm same. I'm the same.
It's tough because if you're contending, then I think Kelce should be your tight end 1. He is the one that you can guarantee is going to be. You admitted, yeah, there's obviously a bit of volatility in him, but he's still a guy. He's the one that you can rely on. Pitts is what we're hoping. We're hoping he can become Travis Kelce, and when he does, if he can continue it for 10 years, I mean, what is he, 10, 11 years younger than Kelce, then amazing. So. Yeah, I think if you win now, I'd still personally rather have Kelce, but I know for a fact long term the value is obviously with Pitts.
Yeah, we both had Kelce 1, Pitts 2 mid-season in our rankings. Ali had Pitts 1, so I guess well done, Ali, on that one. We'll give you that one after that little bit of abuse earlier on. But speaking of tight ends we love, this is a guy that I know you love, and I like this guy as well. I like the team he plays for sometimes. It's Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles. I had to mention Philly on a playoff show. Just to confirm that the Eagles didn't make the playoff. You might not have known with the blowout loss to the Bucks, but we did make it. Actually, the last team that Tom Brady defeated before he retired, so that's a nice stat, I guess. But the only consolation is the Eagles are the last team to beat him in a Super Bowl. So it's not all fun for Tom Brady, not all. But yeah, the guy that stood out for me in the Bucks, the loss to the Bucks was Goddard, tight end, very popular breakout candidate for next season already. 17 game pace post Zach Ertz was 227.2 fantasy points, which was tight end 3 on that pace. And Jacob Sanderson did a great by Goddard thread, highlighting metrics like it was 4th in target rate, tight end 1 in yards per out ran, 6th in target share. Lots of data backing up a Mark Andrews type leap. To be honest, I don't hate the shout. I often compare Philly as a mini Baltimore, the real life blueprint if they are going to go all in on Hurts. And I definitely see Goddard as the alpha wide receiver in the offense. I think the tight end 1 overall season is unlikely. I think Philly are going to add wide receiver talent, and also I don't see Jalen Hurts as a Lamar Jackson caliber passer, which that says enough really on Hurts. But plenty to suggest that Goddard's a player to target. Out of the group below the top 6, he stands out. There's guys like Schultz who could end up anywhere. There's Postman Pat. He could have anyone as his QB. Dawson Knox I mentioned. Robert Tonyan vibes. Noah Fant. I think he's a little bit overrated. Mike Gesicki, again, he could end up anywhere on any team. So I think if it's a target outside of the top 6, it's Dallas Goedert. I think he's got the best chance of moving up. I also think he's a great placeholder to keep on your roster until you are ready to trade up for one of those top 2 or 3. So what do you see as Goddard's absolute ceiling in Dynasty with the less than elite Jalen Hurts as his QB?
Well, as you say, he's one of my favourite players, especially at the tight end position. And I do think the upside is huge with Goddard. And I'm going to say top 3. I think top 3 tight end in 2022. I could maybe even push for top 2, to be honest. I'm not excited about him. I get all the concerns with obviously the quarterback. Yeah, I know that the quarterback is the issue, but he's going to be one of the top pass catching options in this offense. And when you talk about these elite tight ends, they've all got one thing in common, and it's that opportunity, that target share. That they tend to be the lead target in that offense. So, I mean, looking at Goddard, I think he's arguably the number 1 target in that team. Taking nothing away from Devontae Smith, who was a guy that he definitely proved me wrong, a guy that I wasn't super excited about landing with the Eagles, but he did look good in flashes. But I just think Goddard is that reliable tight end that your quarterback needs, and somebody like Hurts, he's gonna pepper him with targets. He averaged 6 targets per game last season, 11.6 fantasy points per game, and was the tight end 5 from week 7 to week 17. That was obviously after Zach Ertz got traded. So yeah, a lot of exciting signs when you think about Goddard and what he can do in 2022. And I'm going to say, top 3. I think it's definitely within his range of outcomes. Probably going to be a guy that I'm going to be super high on when I drop my rankings. Yeah, you're probably going to think I'm a little bit in love with Goddard, but I've been waiting for it, Kev. It's been a long time coming at it with Goddard.
Yeah.
The fact that we now get to see him as that lead tight end, it's really exciting.
Yeah, I wonder if you'll be as excited when it's Malik Willis throwing passes to him.
Well, I wouldn't hate it.
I wouldn't believe
as long as he's getting targets, Kev, that's all I care about. As long as if you throw him the ball, let him do the rest.
Yeah, it's gonna be squeaky bum time for the Ertz owners. If there's any more positive performances from these rookie QBs this offseason at the combine or pro days, etc., I'd be a nervous Hurts owner. I might be a nervous Goddard owner if Malik Willis is throwing passes, but I do like him. I'm going to plug myself, actually. I went on the Dynasty Drive show with Matt and Ali a couple of weeks back and took Malik Willis at the 110. So cheers for that, lads. So yeah,
had to get that one in there.
Look, I don't have many good takes or positive bits of content, so I'm going to plug that one. So yeah, that brings us to the end of tonight's show, where we've reviewed the standout performances from the 2021 NFL playoffs from a Dynasty point of view. So have you got any thoughts on today's show? Any final thoughts from today's show, Matt?
Yeah, I think it's good that we've gone over these guys and the ones that have stood out in the playoffs. These are the kind of performances that they usually get forgot about, to be honest, in fantasies. We know that they don't show up on the game log, on Sleeper and stuff like that, wherever you play your fantasy football. So they tend to be forgotten about. But yeah, one more game to go, Kev, until it's all in the books. Just the Super Bowl. Just the Super Bowl to go. I'm going to back the Rams, Kev. I know you touched on maybe it could be the Bengals, but I mean, they're at home. I just think they're going to do it and do it for Odell Beckham Jr. I want him to get that ring. But it's interesting with the Rams. They're kind of like that owner in your Dynasty league. They've sold off all the future assets. They've gone all in for the win, and it's kind of played out for them. They've got to the final. But yeah, I think that they could potentially be an orphan in a year or two, given the way that things have gone.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's an awesome analogy, that, Matt. I think all I would add to that is, if you're terrible at drafting in Dynasty, trade your picks away or get better at your process. Do a Rams. If you're struggling, just trade all your picks. If you're making picks like Tutu Atwell, then you're better off trading your picks away for veterans. So crazy playoffs. I don't think anybody was picking the Bengals to make the Super Bowl even as late as a month ago. But some predictable parts. So elite guys smashed it. Cooper Kupp, who we didn't even mention today because it's just a given that he's crushed it. Travis Kelce, Mike Evans. But who saw Gabe Davis hanging a 50 burger on the Chiefs? My biggest takeaway from the playoffs from a Dynasty point of view is the vividness bias that fantasy players will remember the last game or the playoffs as a whole. Use that to your advantage and target the underperformers or sell the overachievers. And then also we've got some big news at the Fantasy Wildcard. We're going to be dropping some news just before Super Bowl Sunday. So do keep your eyes peeled on our Twitter page just before kickoff. We were going to do it halftime, but I'll be too busy watching Eminem and Dre rip it up. So
yeah.
So, but yeah, it's
exciting.
It is really exciting news. We'll be glad to share it with you all, and I'm sure you'll like it. So yeah, just thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Wildcard. Also leave us a 5-star podcast review if you've enjoyed the show today. This does really help us with getting exposure to a wider audience. And join us for our next show, which drops the podcast next Tuesday, February the 15th, and stream on Wednesday the 16th at 8 p.m. UK time, where we're going to welcome on the awesome Wardy of the Fantasy Collective to discuss his Dynasty Value winners and losers of the 2021 season. Thank you once again. Have a good one.